Hey guys, good morning, good afternoon. This is Jason Flame, host of the Master Motivation Podcast, where I have the honor and the privilege to interview guests that will bring some motivation, inspiration, and education for the day. Before I introduce our guests, I do want to take a moment just to recognize that today is 9/11. And even after all these years, I can still feel and see from so many family members and just looking at the posts on social media today that we will absolutely never, ever forget those that lost their lives that day and those that were there to support and help and just be there in that day. So once again, we will never forget 9/11. Now, today we have an amazing guest. This is Justin Deal. He has been a crucial part of PayDay's success for the past 13 years, serving in roles such as sales manager, brand ambassador, and director of fun. His outstanding contributions have been instrumental in the company's hyper growth, enabling PayDay to both expand by over 300% in the past 3 years and become among the largest independently owned payroll companies in New Jersey. Deal prioritizes not only the business, but also employees' well-being. He has helped numerous employees set health goals and coach them to successfully achieve them. His personal achievements are equally remarkable, being named 20 under 40 and actively participating in various charitable organizations such as Bancroft, Project Refit, and the Ronald McDonald House. Deal's greatest source of pride is his family, as he is a devoted husband and father of 4 who takes an active role in his family's lives. Justin, welcome to the Master Motivation Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. Absolutely an honor to be here.
I'm excited. You know, you and I had a conversation. It seems like it's been a while ago because I think we booked this interview, as I do with most of my guests, many months ago, maybe as far as a year ago. And I was just really excited, in the conversation that we had. And you were recommended to me from a good friend. And, just watching, what you're posting on social media and your general attitude, demeanor, your values. I knew that you would be a great guest today. So the first question that I want to ask you is, what is your motivation waking up each and every morning?
Honestly, for me, it's an easy one. Having 4 children and my wife, it's just to set the example. It's too often I think we give ourselves a lot of outs and excuses as if we don't have a lot of control over the things that happen in life and the decisions we get to make, but we have way more control than we give ourselves credit for. And I just want to show my children what those steps are, what the right things are to do, and and be real with them. I'm very vulnerable. Hopefully, you see that on my social media as well. And I'm very clear in that I do not love waking up early every morning. But having a family, running a business, when I looked at the X's and O's, I was like, all right, there's only one place where I can take care of my body, overflow my cup, get up early to the gym. And it had to be, between 5 and 7 a.m., before the phones start ringing, before the school routines start, and before just the chaos in this household, as you can imagine, with 6 people running around. It's really just to be the example, to be the husband, be the father, be the friend, be the leader in the community that they need to see.
I love that. That's so awesome. And we need more men like yourselves that talk about these things and talk about the importance of family and family values and being that leader and being that example for our children. Because, what I find sometimes is that we are so busy, right? You talked about excuses and you talked about, all these things. We are so busy trying to make a life of success. And we're so hyper focused on, making money or whatever it is, right? That we're at work all the time and we're missing those moments with our children. We're missing that time with our family. And I know for myself, there was a time in my life where I felt that was starting to slide. And just like you, most important thing is that my kids can look back and go, yeah, my dad was there at my baseball games. My dad was there at my dance recital. My dad was there when I needed him. And he was an amazing example. So since we're talking about family and examples, can we talk a little bit about your parents and your family and what kind of examples they were to you?
Absolutely. I mean, my parents, honestly, they are my rocks. We don't have, not a crazy story, but it's not your traditional story either. So I always joke I was the best mistake my parents ever made. They had me at 17 and 20. So I joke I'm an honorary alumni of the class of '86 at Triton in New Jersey. But my mother, she forwent going to college because she had me. So she really kind of had to figure things out. Let's say she graduated from the hard knocks and kind of worked her way up through other kind of jobs that were just that. They were jobs, not careers. She started in the restaurant industry. My father went to school in Berkeley at Boston to be a musician. He's very gifted, definitely uses the opposite side of his brain. And, I saw them. What's interesting when your parents are only 17 and 20 years older is they're actually old enough to kind of digest the lessons. When they were 30, they had a 13-year-old. When I was 30, I had a 3-year-old. And, you can sweep some things under the rugs and your kids won't remember. They don't really grasp what's going on. But at 13, I was very cognizant of what's going on around me, kind of what our finances were, what our politics were, what a lot of the things that most parents don't converse with their children about. That was something that my parents thankfully always shared with me. So I watched my mother. My siblings are 7 and 10 years younger than me because at first I figured you can't duplicate greatness. So they were kind of waiting for a while. But then I realized it was just I was probably a little stressing for them. They were like, let's get our bearings together before we start having more and more kids. But I watched my parents incrementally and consistently do things that put them in a better phase in life. I mean, when you look at the stats, the fact that they were 17 and 20, they actually did get married. My mother without a college education, my father with an education through music. You wouldn't expect either of them to be making more than like $50,000 a year. You'd expect them to probably be divorced at this point, but they've always kind of set that standard of here's what hard work, consistency, work ethic, just like being a person of your word. This is what can happen. My mother's a big Tony Robbins person, and she's very big on, change your story, change your life. And that's one of the things that she's always shown us. So she had her limiting beliefs. She worked at one of the larger payroll companies when she was, younger, and she never thought that she could make 6 figures because she didn't go to college. And that was something she had to work through. And just the way the universe lines things up sometimes, she qualified to go on a trip with the big company. And lo and behold, Tony Robbins was the speaker. And she realized that that was her limiting belief. And that year, she not only cracked into 6 figures, but it was the kind of the golden standard for her of that year. And she never went backwards. So my father on the music side, he's had some interesting ups and downs. We live in South Jersey, and he was commuting every day to Conshohocken. So people who know this area in the Blue Route, I've been fortunate. I've never had to sit in traffic and commute. But I would always wonder, I'm like, why is my father about to kill somebody over dishes in the sink? And I've sat through that traffic like once or twice as an adult, and I clearly get that now. It was so much more than just the dishes in the sink. But I saw him, go through the music industry, had some great accolades and things that happened. Then 2008, when the economy crashed, he was doing a lot of original pieces of music, and marketing kind of transitioned over to using nostalgic records and things that actually drew people in. So he had to pivot and figure out what he was going to do. And again, using that other side of his brain, he was always into photography. We traveled a decent amount. He would always take these beautiful landscape photographs. Thankfully, I had some connections that were in the wedding industry. We had some family that was in the wedding industry. And he was like, I'm going to start doing this. So he got the camera. My dad's the guy who reads the manual when he buys a new car, so he knows what every button does. And he learned his camera inside and out, and developed a company, and he's been doing great ever since. So I say all that to say this. I constantly saw my parents come up against hurdles, and I was old enough to understand what the hurdle was, watch them get by it, and then take that lesson so I could then use it when that hurdle came up in my life. And my parents have always done that. My mother is my business partner in our payroll company, and she's the shining example of what a leader is. I mean, she's the first one in, the last one out every day. Being a family business, obviously there are no off days, whether we're at dinner on Sunday or we're on vacation. It's always business time. And I've realized that, but she's also great. Even though my mother, she wasn't an owner when I was in high school, and I was a 4-sport athlete and did all the things and was the captain, she always showed up, to your point that we were talking about earlier. And I don't know that there's a more rewarding feeling as a kid and a parent that you're not sure if your parents are going to get there, and you look up in the stands and you see them, it's like, now it's go time. And the
Mhm.
opposite, I know now as a parent, I don't always tell my kids I'm coming to things because I want, that little source of surprise and little
Mhm.
adrenaline rush for them. But walking in and then seeing them just light up because they weren't sure if dad was going to be there. I mean, honestly, it gets you emotional. It's just, I always say there's deposits into the bank account, there's deposits into the soul, and the deposits to the soul just, they hit so much different and they're so much more fulfilling.
Oh, wow, what a great. It sounds like you had a very strong, supportive childhood growing up. Good values, the work ethic, but also that mom and dad, were there for you. And now you talk about a lot of positive and really great things. Having parents that were 20 and 17, were there any challenges with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, looking back now, I always say to my parents, they did a great job of somehow, covering it up. But, we weren't poor, but we were broke. I mean, I don't know how they did it with three kids. We still somehow would like go on vacations, but I would say like they definitely, like, they never had the nicest of things. They worked tirelessly, especially when my mother was in the restaurant industry. Anybody who's worked in there knows that's 24/7, 365. So she'd be coming home at 2 a.m. after working from TGI Fridays, would be up, at 7 to help all of us get ready. And you could tell like she was a little irritable, obviously a couple hours of sleep, dealing with some kind of chaos at the restaurant. And then we're complaining because, we're having Fruit Loops and not Cheerios or whatever the issue was that morning. But she would handle it with grace. And she was always, my mother is pretty stern, but very loving in that. So she's direct with the point, but in a loving tone, if that makes sense. My father is pretty laid back for the most part until he kind of gets to his wits' end, and we have a token George Deal freakouts. So a few people have actually witnessed those, but when they happen, they are one for the memory books. But with my parents, it was that, and then them actually, being younger parents, figuring out how to live their life. They had to sacrifice a lot. Again, I was a four-sport athlete. They were young. I had two younger siblings. So, they would miss tournaments and kind of have to send me out with other families. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it. But now, as a parent, I realize what sacrifice that was for
Mhm.
them to pay the money, send me off with another family, but miss out on all the highs and lows of the tournament and just the moment. So, I mean, there's tons of more struggles, of course, but those are the two, the finances and just the sacrifices that they gave. So my sister could cheerlead, so my brother, who is, very intelligent, he's a great academic, so he could have the tutors and things he needed to succeed. And it just, now I'm realizing how expensive sports are with my own kids, and just, putting the money out to keep me playing. It's, I have no idea how they did it. I say to them all the time, I'm like, I'm in a very fortunate position, and I'm pretty positive that I make more as an individual than they made as a couple. And that's been for the past few years. So I'm like, how, like, were you guys not paying mortgages and like just credit card, everything? Like, I don't get it. But, they always came through. Christmases, were always amazing. Time was always spent. We knew we were loved. We knew we were taken care of. But we knew if we weren't in when the street lights went on, or if we weren't within that earshot when she was calling, there was probably going to be some problems when he got home.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that we look at our parents a lot of times, right? And there's a lot we look at our parents in two ways. Things that we want to emulate, things that we want to do when we become parents or when we get married. And then there's the other things that we don't want to use, right? Or we don't want to be like. And it sounds like you have a lot of things where you looked at mom and dad and said, this is the kind of parent that I want to be. And we always have those lessons, like those, the outbursts from your dad or whatever, when it kind of went off the rails every now and again. But that teaches us something too. I mean, teaches us how to have thick skin sometimes and how to just kind of work through that, those problems, if you will. Now, you had two younger siblings, 7 and 10 years younger than you,
Mhm.
correct? What was your
Yeah.
relationship with them like? Because I have a brother who's 7 years younger than me. I also have a brother who's 4 years younger than me. My middle brother, we're real close. My youngest brother, pretty close growing up, and we actually have the same, type of career now. But 7 and 10 years, that's a pretty big gap. So did you ever feel like kind of more of a parent in some way, or you know what I mean? Like where you stepped in that way?
Absolutely. As the oldest, I joke that was back when everybody was kind of taking care of each other's families. It was more community based back then, and it was a little less stringent than today. That things that would be very frowned upon. But I was probably babysitting my siblings at 12. I would kind of, like I said, both parents were working, so I would come home from school. I would get them off the bus. It kind of helped me become more independent. But I definitely played that role a lot of times. And it's funny. I thought we had like an amazing relationship growing up, and I didn't realize until a little later in life that I actually missed a ton of their childhood because I was kind of becoming an adult at that time. So again, with the 7 and 10 year difference, when I was young for my grade, so at 17, I went away to college. So my brother was 10, my sister was 7, and they, I only realized it because they start to tell these family stories now when we're on vacation. And I'm like, I don't remember that. And I realized, well, I was away in college for a while when some of the things were happening. I met my wife now just after college, kind of as I was pursuing the combine, and she had a place. So I lived with her a lot of the time. So from about 18 to 24, I was out of the house. So I missed basically them growing up from, not even teenagers through adolescence. And, it's interesting. My brother, he had ADHD. And he's now, he lives in Poland. He's in a doctorate program, and he would always say, he's not a big fan of certain pharma. That he kind of always felt like he was a zombie, like just walking around. He tested off the charts when it came to, the national tests, but in the day-to-day things, he was just bored, and like people couldn't figure out how to connect with him. And he definitely acted out a lot. He was, I think Miles still probably like sleeps with a knife under his pillow, kind of some of those weird things that you want to be on his bad side. And then my younger sister, she's the princess and the baby, of course. So, we had a great relationship. I was always I've been 6'4" since I was like 12 years old. So I was always like the big scary brother who made sure if any guys weren't acting right, that she was like, who my brother is, right? Like, I know he's 10 years ago, but like his name still, rings true in the hallways. And, it was great watching her grow up, just kind of the lessons I had learned. So like one of my big regrets was, even though we traveled a good amount, I never had the opportunity to do the study abroad while I was in college because I was playing football. So I really pushed my siblings. I was like, take the time and go live somewhere, like enjoy it, soak up the culture, do the day to day. And, both of them thankfully ran with that. My sister studied abroad in Barcelona. She went backpacking through Europe for a few months and really just, got all of that in. My brother, he went completely off the rails with it. He took a year off in between his master's and his doctorate and literally lived in a new city in a new country every month for a year. Now, like I said, he lives in Poland, so he's always traveling over in Europe. And they really embraced that. And I take a lot of pride in it that it's like, hey, even if that's the only thing that they ever listen to me, it really shapes your worldview. And when I learned that only 10% of Americans have passports, it really made me understand now as an adult kind of why we are where we are as a country, because we don't really understand a lot of just the gratitude we should have for where we were just born and where we were brought up and the opportunities that we have. So I'm very fortunate that they listened to that. They went all in on that. And we thankfully do. We have, what I'd like to believe is a very good perspective on what's going on in the world, the big picture, and kind of what we should be doing as individuals.
Oh, wow. I never considered that only 10% of Americans have a passport. I mean, that sounds like ridiculous almost.
Yeah. Yeah, you would think, because I live in a very, we're right outside of Philly. New York's just there. DC's right below us. So it feels like everybody I know has a passport and travels. But then you think, obviously, the main part. And I have a lot of people in my family that are like, I don't need to go to Europe. Like, I can look at that online. I'm like, it's just being with people when there's that language barrier, having the cuisine, seeing the architecture. My children, as young as they are, they've been to at least half a dozen countries each. And it's, my oldest daughter's seen Stonehenge. And it's like when you're in front of things like that you can't even wrap your brain around how before there was any technology and these big tools, like civilization somehow built this thing with these massive stones that, it's a sundial. It has all these other things outside of just being this beautiful thing. And it makes you realize the U.S. like just we're such babies. Like our history is only but like a snap, right? And we miss out on. I love Europe because they're so family centric. It's like it seems like families first, their faith, then kind of finances. Where in the U.S., I think we could argue that finances is most people's God, right? Most people are worshiping that, and that's what they do. And our families a lot of times fall to the wayside. I mean, we were just in Paris a couple weeks ago, and I tell the same story. My nephew was with us. He's one, and we would walk. I bribe him every day with macaroons to be good. That was his jam. So we would walk to this little bakery, right on our block, and there was about 3 or 4, al fresco restaurants, and every waitress, waiter, the owners, they would physically pat him on the head, kind of touch his back as he walked by, and you would just see like their sense of pride in the next generation. Where in the U.S. we don't really do that. People get very weird, and it's a shame for me because I love children, and I have 4 of them, 3 girls and a boy. So when other little girls come over to approach me or can you push me on the swing or can you do this, you unfortunately have to kind of pause and be like, where are your parents? Like, are they okay? Like, hey, I'm gonna,
Right.
especially the swing, like you got to watch where on their back, how you're put. Like you never know. And it's a shame that we've gotten society to that part where we can't all collectively, help one another and help raise children because some people aren't fortunate that they get both their parents to be around all the time. So if I can spend 5 minutes with a child that doesn't get that much love, why should I feel weird in that?
Well, imagine teaching martial arts every single day and working with children and always wondering if the parents are 100% on board with what you're teaching, right? I mean, the ones that stick around, I'm sure that they're 100% on board, but sometimes I find people slip away because maybe our values don't match up. And I mean, and that's okay. But, I as you were saying that, I was like, man, every time I'm teaching martial arts, I wonder how someone is reacting or responding in their own mind to what I just said and how I'm teaching or, how I complimented or critiqued their child, because people are ultra sensitive these days. I mean, ultra sensitive to every detail. You said something earlier about your brothers. I've been thinking about it since you said it, because my youngest brother is 7 years younger than me. You said that you felt like you missed out on some of their childhood because, when my brother was 11 years old, I was 18 and I was moving out. And so from the time I was 18 until, all the way through my adulthood, until he became an adult, I guess I did miss some things that I didn't even realize that just sticks with me now. So I think next time I have a conversation with my brother, I might have to bring that up and just be like, man, in this time now, of course, he was teaching at my school and we were working together, but it was still kind of separate because he was at home and I was out on my own. But anyway, that just stuck with me. I just thought I'd bring that up. But I want to talk. What? Say that again.
I was just saying, with family running the business together, like, my wife says that sometimes she thinks my mom and I are just like feet kicked up, eating bonbons, catching up. And I'm like, no, we're running a business. Like, you don't get to have, my point being, those moments where you're just being brothers, right? Like, you're the boss, he's the employee, or you're the partners, you have the mission. So, like, yes, you're in the vicinity and proximity of one another, but you're not spending that quality time that brothers should be doing.
That's 100%. The point there is that, we were working together and he was, teaching in the school and we were on the mat together, but we weren't necessarily always brothers as we were doing that. Man, I don't know. That's going to stick with me today. That's going to be a big one for me now, but I do want to move on and talk about, you're a 4-sport athlete. What 4 sports did you play? And you did talk about moving on to play football later on. So let's talk about your sports career.
Yeah, so I played football, basketball, baseball, and volleyball. Played everything but volleyball my entire life. Volleyball just kind of randomly happened. So as a freshman, our varsity coach kind of tapped me and said, hey, next year we're looking at you as a sophomore. You're going to be a starter. So I was on the baseball team at that point. It was the off season. He said, yeah, you're done with baseball. You need to come get in the weight room, get big, get ready for football. And I was like, hey, you said varsity. Those were the only magic words I wanted to hear. Whatever you need, sir. Like, I'm in. So did that, had a great sophomore year. And I decided that year, I was like, well, hey, I know I'm starting again. I came back. I was a producer. So let's try this volleyball sport out. It's always fun in gym class. my gym teacher happened to be the volleyball coach, and he was like, "Why don't you come out? Like, I know you're an athlete. I'll let you skip the initial conditioning part because you're coming right off of basketball. Just come out. Let's see what you have." And I mean, we put together an amazing team. Unfortunately, where we are, we have a lot of beach towns somewhat in our vicinity that play it much more than we do at a higher level. So we would get into the playoffs, but we would get smoked all the time. We were just a bunch of decent athletes that didn't play that sport going out. But yeah, so baseball, it's like everything. I'm a huge advocate for playing multiple sports. I know a lot of now capitalism's unfortunately trickled down into sports for the kids. And there's these AAU teams, and it's like you have to be on it and you got to stay on it, and it's a little political at times. But I've always learned, like, Nick Saban's the perfect example. There's some of these coaches that only recruit multi-sport athletes because every sport is going to teach you something else that's going to make you stronger in whatever your best sport is. And that was kind of what I used each one for. So, football, I was a lineman, offensive and defensive. Basketball, I played as anywhere from a 3 to 5, but that really helped me with my footwork, being more nimble, light on my toes, hand-eye coordination, obviously the explosion of jumping. And then baseball, same thing. It would kind of teach me the endurance part of it with a lot of the sprints and stuff that we would do, moving the hips well through on a swing. Again, some footwork, hand-eye coordination. And then volleyball was honestly just fun and a lot of good work on the legs for the explosion, so you could pancake a few more people on the football field. And it was just one of those, like, everything helped me get better. The only regret I have, my neighbors were both All-American wrestlers, and their dad always tried to get me to wrestle. I just loved basketball too much. I should have known I wasn't going anywhere with that. And I truly believe that wrestling would have been a lot better for me as a lineman, right? It's just more hand-to-hand combat, man-to-man, just my weight, your weight, figuring out leverage. And that would have taken me a little bit further than, being able to jump, run a little faster, and dribble.
Yeah, I didn't wrestle in high school more than a few weeks because martial arts had already consumed my life at that time. But my son was able to wrestle for a couple years, and I fell in love. I loved it then in high school, but I fell in love with it even more when I got to watch my son wrestle, and just the work ethic that wrestlers have. Any wrestler, the football coach was dying to get the wrestlers on their team because they're the most aggressive, the most just ready to hit, ready to get after it. And it was such an amazing sport. And I've had several wrestling coaches on as guests on the show. It's just so great to listen to their mindset, just the mindset that they instill. So that was awesome. But you went on to play football, beyond high school, correct?
Yes. I played at Wagner in Staten Island as a smaller D1 school. And that was one of the defining moments of my life. That's when I got the old Mike Tyson punch in the face. So, a lot of life came easy to me when I was growing up. Like I said, I was 6'4" at a young age, as you can imagine. Any coach was like, "I'll take that kid," whether I was good or not. It was just, you can't teach height. So, thankfully I was pretty good at the sports. School-wise, I have a pretty good memory. So I've always said high school, I feel, is more memorization where college is application. And I didn't really know how to apply things because I had never set standards for studying. Same thing, my work ethic, I liked being in the gym. I loved playing the sports, but I didn't love the early morning weightlifting. So when I went to college and it was like, 5 a.m., you're late if you're not there at 4:55, and then you have breakfast, and you have films, and then you have class, and you have practice, and you have films. I honestly got wore out, and I had a good freshman year. My coaches started telling me that I had all the intangibles to go to the NFL. And for a 17-year-old kid to hear that was probably the worst thing they could have told me because I thought I had already made it. So I really started to slack off on the school side because I figured, hey, smaller school, they're going to float me through this. Like, I'm a big deal. And my sophomore year, I found myself academically ineligible. And it was the first time in my life something didn't work out. And I didn't know what to do. And to make it even worse, my parents at this point had saved up enough money. They were taking their first trip to Europe. So this is even more so why I remember it so well. They get a call from my coach that was like, "Hey, we need you to come to the office." And they were on their way to JFK. So they were like, "Okay, like, we'll pop in." And the meeting basically went that, "Hey, your son's possibly going to break his contract and we're not going to be able to honor his scholarship anymore." So you can imagine just the anxiety, the nerves, like I couldn't sleep for a while with it. I just felt like a failure, but I still didn't take the action. They wound up, I had to go to summer school, and I thought the coach said one class. So I lived with some of my basketball buddies, took the class, got the grade. I get a call 3 weeks before I'm supposed to report back to camp, and they're like, you're supposed to take 2 classes, dummy. You only took one. We found you a school, Nassau Community College in Long Island. So during all of camp, you're going to have to wake up early, go to the school, go to the class in the morning, come back, do the second part of the double session, do your lifts, whatever else, and do that Monday through Friday to get the grade. As you could probably already assume, I got there each morning. If you've ever driven from Staten Island to Long Island, the Long Island Expressway is no joke. So it would take me about an hour and change plus tolls. And I would get there and I'd be exhausted from my lifts. I, for some reason, took a criminal justice class because I figured that would be easy. And I failed it. And I tried to talk to the guy who was a state trooper, who was definitely a no BS kind of guy. I was like, look, sir, I know I don't deserve it. I know I didn't do the things, but like, I'm going to lose my scholarship and my life is over if I can't get a C or better in this class. And he was like, look, man, you showed up each day. I'll give you that. But like, you never participated. I caught you sleeping sometimes in the back of the class. I wish I could help you, but you don't deserve it. You haven't earned it. And I really did blame that guy for a lot of my downfall for years, until I finally came to the realization that, everything in life is our fault, right? It was all the things that I did that had got me to that point. So fast forward, I'm officially out of school. I come back home. And again, I live in a big town, but I was well known. I was involved in everything. I was like on the class council. I was with this thing, Mr. Washington Township, that I was in. A lot of people were rooting for me, is what I'm trying to say. And I come back. I failed out of school, basically. I'm working at Hallmark, wearing a nice schmuck, learning about Vera Bradley bags and selling greeting cards, driving a Ford Windstar that was half rusted, half navy blue. And I was just like, is this it? Like, this is what I'm allowing my life to become? So went to community college. That was obviously a huge shot for your ego. People be coming home from school, and I have to consistently retell the story of, I screwed up. I failed out. Like, this is what I'm trying to do now. Luckily got into a JUCO, which ironically was Nassau, the one that I had messed up in. The coach was like, hey, come on over. Like, let's see what we can do for you. Got my grades back together. I was playing football, but I just realized at that point, school wasn't really for me. I need to interact with people. When I was sitting in these classes where they just spoke at me, not to me, I wouldn't learn, and I didn't retain it. I wasn't interested in it. So I just decided at that point, like, I'm done with school. I'm going to get an agent, and I'm going to try to make it to the NFL on my own, just with the skills that I had had. I long snapped, which was kind of the side thing that I figured would at least get me into a door. Wound up meeting John Dorenbos, and he kind of helped me out, just to open some more doors. But, unfortunately for me, fortunately for all the guys in the league, nobody made a mistake. So with a long snapper, obviously nobody's looking to draft one or to pick one up unless somebody botches a snap that catches, costs them a game. And that didn't happen for the 2 years that I was, trying to pursue that. Played arena ball during that time out in Bloomington, Illinois. That was terrible. It was soy fields and cornfields everywhere. Good night out was like Buffalo Wild Wings or Chipotle back then. It's in the middle of nowhere. And you made like $300 to $500 a game, depending on a win or a loss. And I was like, this is just, I saw other guys. I was only 22 at the point. I saw guys that were like 30 with families, like still holding on to the dream, like sending their checks home, living off the $100. I was like, this isn't for me. So I was putting all my eggs into one last basket. The Harbaugh brothers have a big special teams camp out in Arizona. I fortunately got myself into it. I was like, this is it. Either these guys, they see me and they see my talent, I get an opportunity, or it wasn't meant to be. And ironically, in that time frame while I was home, I'm working for a courier company delivering payrolls. I'm working out 3-4 hours a day with a trainer. And my mother and our other partner, Rich, are sitting at my kitchen table, and they're both kind of looking at me funny. And I'm assuming I'm like eating cereal. I'm like, I must have like schmutz all over my face or something. And Rich is like, look, man, I got to be honest with you. Like, you're not making the NFL. like, we're getting ready. We're going to start this payroll company. Your mother and I are leaving, one of the big guys, and we think you should be a part of it. You're very personal. You're outgoing. You understand technology. This would be a good thing for you to bet on. And at first, as you can imagine, I'm like, guys, NFL, payroll company, seriously? Like, what are we even comparing here? But I took that weekend to think about it. And, I really sat on Rich's words. And he's always been very blunt with me. And I had that moment of clarity. And I was like, he's right. Like, I don't deserve this. I haven't earned it. Even if I did somehow get into the league through that, I'm robbing somebody else who's like sacrificed and dedicated their entire life to this one skill. And they would deserve it more than I did. I said, not everybody's going to have this opportunity to start a company. So we wound up going out to Vermont, saw the software platform. At that point, I didn't know what a gross to net was. I'd mostly 1099 work through my life. So, taxes and the IRS. I was like, whoa, what's going on with it? Why am I not just getting my $500? Why are you taking a piece of the pie? What is this? And I literally got to learn the entire business from the ground up, which wound up being invaluable.
Wow. Well, that's a huge turn of events for you, because my question earlier was going to be, what was the plan in college? And it sounds like the plan was get to the NFL. Like that was your goal, right? Was there any other backup plan, or was there like, if I don't make it to the NFL, I'm getting a degree in this so I can maybe pursue a career? Was there any backup plan?
I've unfortunately always been a plan A guy. I burn my ships, and it's, I go all in with that. So at that time it wasn't, I literally, like most athletes, I just went in for a business degree because I figured, hey, this seems like that should be simple enough, right? It's not engineering. It's not something that's super complex, but obviously just from how everything turned out, I was not very serious about anything outside of football. And to be quite frank, looking back now, I really wasn't even that serious about football. I think I just loved the idea of what the NFL was and what that could do for my family. Talking about the dreams of buying an estate and building everybody in my family a house so we could all live together. And now I just say, I can still make NFL money just without being in the NFL, and save my body a little bit more, just in a different way. I can do it as an entrepreneur now.
Yeah. Isn't it the case for a lot of people? They love the idea of where they're going, but they're not truly committed to being there. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of think that a lot of people want to be a black belt. They love the idea of being a black belt, but they don't want to do what a black belt has to do after they get there. You know what I mean? Like, I just see, because we have people that make black belt and then they just stop training, quit, move on, do something else. And so, little different, but I just see that a lot in people where they love the idea of where they're going, but not fully committed to it. So, so you're a plan A guy, burn the ships, right? I'm all in on this NFL dream. And then, God has a different plan for you. And here you are now, part of a payroll company. So tell me about some of the challenges about, getting involved in starting this new business, and, just some of the challenges that you currently have with that business.
Sure. I mean, the first one was honestly was killing my ego, right? Like I thought I was meant for this grandeur life. And I was like, man, a payroll company, like I'm going to be sitting in an office at a cubicle, like, figuring this out. And I had zero knowledge. So it was also intimidating to think I'm going in an industry that I know absolutely nothing about. And there's only the three of us starting this company. So not like you can just hide, like you have to pull your weight, you have to figure things out. And then it went to figuring out, okay, now what is the part of the business that I can actually help and excel in? And for years it was operations. I had to kind of learn, like I said, from the ground floor up of, just processing and entering payroll, to how to build out a client, to the taxes, to the banking, to the sales portion. And I finally got a taste of sales, and I realized, man, this is it. Like this, I love this part. Like, love meeting people, love having conversations, love hearing their pain points and figuring out how to solve them. Love connecting the dots for somebody else's business with somebody else in my network's business, so they can, build together as well. And I had to, kind of learn how to negotiate with my partners as well, because they thought they needed me on the operational end for a while, because for 8 years that was all I did, and I wasn't broke, so why would we fix it? And thankfully, as weird as it sounds, when the pandemic happened, we had to make a lot of shifts within our business. One being, remote workers, another being we realized we're in uncharted territory here, and like we need some other really good, brilliant people around us. And I had been courting who's now our COO for about the first 10 years we were in business. We had offered him a job 2 other times, and he said no. And he thankfully, things were kind of going in a weird direction right before the pandemic for his company as well. And literally on March 11th of 2020, he committed to come on board with us. And ironically, at that same point, I had kind of negotiated with the other partners that I was going to go full time into sales. I'd been doing it like 1 or 2 days a week, still juggling all of my operational duties, but I started to kind of outperform the sales team we had at that point, and more people were just kind of validating me and saying, "Man, this is definitely what you were born to do. You have to go all in on it." The fact that you're performing to your level only 2 days a week, like you have to have those conversations for yourself. And I don't really love to rock the boat. I'm very like, as much as, even though I'm a leader, I'm more of a role player. And I think that's like, especially as a lineman, I was always used to like, I wasn't the guy getting the recognition. I was the guy who sprung the block, that got the touchdown, that got the write up. But I've never cared about being the guy who hoists the trophy. I just want my team to win. And I realized that's kind of served me through the years, because people who work with us realize that I now have no ego, because I killed that, like I said in the very beginning of starting this company. So now 13 years in, now I want to help other people grow, hit their goals. And honestly, I just want them to be the best in their position, which is going to be way better than most of the things that I can do. I say it all the time. I'm probably the least special person in our entire company, but I'm just very good at the lane that I stay in. And we have amazing people around us.
I love this. And just quick shout out to Dana Abbott. Thank you, Dana, for watching. Hope you're doing well. We're talking to Justin Deal, who's talking about his payroll company that he and his mom, and you have another partner, correct?
Correct.
That runs this company in New Jersey. And man, how cool is it though for you to be able to say that you don't have, you can kill your ego and you just want your team to win. This took me a long time to really understand and learn, because I was the main instructor on the floor. I was in the spotlight. My name was always being called out. And, to get to that next level in my business, I had to be able to step back and allow other people to be in that spotlight and to get the credit, if you will. And you know what? I have to say that sometimes it feels even better watching someone else on the team get the credit and receive success, and that you're a part of it. I've seen this in my martial arts career. I've seen it in my pro wrestling career. I've seen it in my martial arts business consulting career, where when you're able to help someone else go to that next level, I mean, the only thing better than that is watching my kids succeed. There is nothing more special to me than watching my kids succeed in life, succeed in sports, succeed in school. It's just like, wow, it's so awesome. And yeah, I had a small part in it, right? But I didn't do it. And it feels good to be on that team. So I think that that's amazing that you have that ability, because so many people do have a hard time with that, not being in the spotlight, not getting the credit. But you told me a lot of things that were challenging about starting the business, but what you were talking about was how you love sales. And I want to talk about, what are some of the positives and the successes and the things that you really love about your company?
Yeah, so what I really love is just our personal touch. So I know a lot of people talk about customer service, but we really live that. Our whole mantra is really to exceed service expectations in our industry, because the bar is, honestly, it's just so low. It's kind of sad that so many of the larger companies that people work with, they're used to call centers, and they're used to being on hold for a half hour, and they're used to 48-hour response times, and those just aren't the things that we do. So like I said, my other two partners were previously with one of the big guys, and 14 years ago they saw that writing on the wall. They're like, everything we do is transactional, where it should be relationship driven. Like, I don't want to just be churning clients and bringing them in the door, but losing them out the back door just as fast. We have to be able to retain and build that, that pond, so we can be in the ocean, but, keep everybody happy while we're bringing sales in the door. So we're very big on, supporting our clients in other ways. I'm very big on events. I love to get people together. Like I was saying earlier, kind of connect the dots. So I do monthly cigar events. I have a podcast that I have people on. I'm on a TV show once a week, and I get to have other industry experts in and just kind of, share what they do, why, or what you should know in that industry. And just I get to empower other people, which is, again, it's that deposits to the soul thing that I was talking about earlier. It is great when I sell a big deal and I know money's coming in, like that's cool. But when a good friend of mine runs a company, and he told me recently, somebody that I'd introduced him with, they went up doing about $1 million in business together last year. And I was more excited for that than anything in our company, because I was like, man, again, just to be a little part of that, I heard something here. I knew this about him, connected those dots, and it wound up, thankfully, both guys were good guys in that situation and took care of one another and did what they said they would do. And it made a substantial impact on his business. And you can't do that in operations most of the time because you're so busy in the business and running things that you can't be out there in the streets hearing what's going on, hearing people's pain points, what they need, what they want, and then finding the solution for them. And I think that's the thing I love most now. I'm constantly curious. I love learning about different industries, what's good and bad in businesses. Because again, I'm 36. I'm still a younger guy. I'll be in PayDay forever, but PayDay, I always say, is going to be my foundation that will kind of springboard me into different opportunities. Because again, I'm always dealing with other business owners. I'm in coaching communities. I really like being around other high achievers. So just learning the lessons from them, hearing opportunities that I didn't even know existed. I think that's one of the coolest parts too, is you find out all the things you didn't even know that you don't know. That's just a whole nother, just mind blown on that. A lot of us know what we don't know, but you start talking about some things and you write it down and you're like, your kids are usually good with that, right? They'll ask you a question and you're like, I have no idea. I couldn't even lie to you on this one. Can't even make anything up. Right. And that's that's part of the beauty in it.
Yeah. You mentioned this several times, deposits to the soul. Where did this come from for you? Where did you learn this, or how did that come to be for you?
It was honestly kind of just a feeling. And at one point, a few years ago, I was like on a pot and it just came out of my mouth and I articulated it that way. Because we have like a mantra in our family, which is best day ever. So if you follow me on social media, my stories every day when I'm leaving the gym, that's kind of my sign off, is to remind people, because it's a mindset, right? Of like, best day ever. You have the choice. Today can be terrible. It could be great. It could be the best ever. But the deposits to the soul, when I got into the sales side, of course, in the beginning, you're stoked to be making money. You're like, oh, killing this, killing that. That's a check. That's a check. But the first time I had actually connected to other people and they did business, there was just a whole nother source of pride that came with that. And kind of like you said, it's the same kind of thing. I'm fortunate. A few of my best friends work with me, so they have different roles within the company. And kind of to your point earlier, I've seen them buy homes, start families, get the cool car or toy that they've always wanted. And although I didn't do that for them, the fact that we were friends and by proximity, they worked with the company that we all took the risk on. It's just so cool to see other people living their best life, and knowing that even if it was only 1% that I was responsible for, that is more fulfilling than the 100% of the check that I'm responsible for that comes through the door.
Awesome. I love this. And I love the best day ever mindset, so you can absolutely wake up and you really get to choose, what kind of day you're going to have, what kind of attitude are you going to go into this day with. So love that. Last question before we get ready to wrap here. So by the way, anybody watching live, if you have any questions or anything you want to know, please let us know and drop those comments. But a lot of people with different payroll companies, right? What are, your top tips for business owners to look out for when it comes to dealing with other payroll companies, and what are your best tips for them to look out for?
Sure. So a big thing I would always say to folks is you want to find out if they're publicly traded or not, right? Because our big thing we talk about too is I don't answer to Wall Street, I answer to Main Street. So you want people who have their pulse on what's actually going on, not somebody who's just, you're going to be a number in the database that when you call, it's like nobody even knows who you are. It's just, ABC 123. Yeah, what are your hours? Another thing, you want to make sure that folks are properly insured, so bonded and insured. That's the big thing. When we first started our company, when you're the baby in the industry and you're brand new, everybody's heard of the story where the payroll company folds up and owners go to Turks and Caicos with everybody's tax money. And that needs to be one of the questions. Are you bonded and insured, and to what extent? So typically you want folks to have at least $1 million, because most folks are not going to have $1 million in tax deposits. And that's really the only money that you truly care about, where the vendor's taking that and then paying on your behalf for the responsibility. Next thing would be, what's their software and what's their technology look like? Is it something that's advancing? So as your business builds, because most entrepreneurs don't want to be a 5-employee company forever. Some industries are able to do that, but most have to keep adding human capital. So you want to make sure that they have the technology to grow with you, not just something that's a Band-Aid for a year or two, because then you're going to have to go out, do the whole process, get your pricing, and kind of figure out what you need, rather than your company already having that and educating on you on what you could take advantage of down the road. And then kind of what the ownership structure and management, like ask for their organizational chart, because you want to know, okay, how many people are in the organization? Am I going to have a dedicated rep? If that dedicated rep's out, do they have a manager that I can speak to? Or am I just going to like kind of be on hold all the time, hoping that I have the next available rep that we've all heard that fun recording of? And, 30, 40 minutes go by. As a business owner, who has 30 or 40 minutes to sit on hold to ask what typically isn't like an earth-shattering question? And then, from there, what are their partners? So that's another big thing we talk about. Like I said, I want to find pain points for people. And even if it's not something I can solve, so to speak, personally, but I have a very vast network of people that are vetted and I trust. So if you were like, hey, we actually have a hole in our roof, I need, a roof contractor, or, I could use a cleaning company for our office, or whatever it is that you need, you want that person to be able to solve the issue outside of just what their industry does. We're big on that with the company. We always say it's our objective to help. If somebody calls and they order a pizza, you say, hey, you know what? We're not the pizza guy. I can either give you a couple local spots that are really good, or I can forward your call over to them. But we're still going to assist, even though it's not a payroll. We're not just going to say, hey, not a payroll company, and hang up on you. We want to be able to help you solve the problem. And you should feel like it's a partnership, not just a vendor. I kind of hate that word vendor, because it just seems like there's just nothing appealing about that sounds like a relationship. When you have partnerships with folks, they're going to be people where it's a two-way street. You're not just picking up the phone, processing the payroll, and paying them. They're inviting you to things. They're thinking of your business. They pop in from time to time. They actually show that they care about the growth, what your goals are, what your pain points are, and they are at least somewhat active in trying to help you solve those or to reach them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those tips. So for people that are watching this live or will watch this later on a replay, maybe this is an important part of this video today, is just kind of getting these tips when you're dealing with your payroll companies. So thanks for sharing that. And thanks for your time today. Appreciate you being on here. It was a great conversation. I look forward to these, every time I get to be on here with like-minded leaders and, positive mindset and, things like the best day ever, deposits to the soul, talking about limiting beliefs and everything, that went along with your story. I think it was just an amazing time with you today. So appreciate you being here today. And if you hang out just a minute, I'll be right back. But for everybody else that is watching live, thank you again for following the Master Motivation Podcast. Make sure to go to YouTube and subscribe to the Master Motivation Podcast, and look forward to more upcoming guests later this week. So thanks again to Justin Deal for being here today.
Thanks so much, Jason. It's truly an honor and a privilege. And everybody out there, best day ever, y'all.
Go have it. Best day ever. I love it. Take care, guys. See you soon.